Good morning, students. As we know that in order to understand anything in English literature, we must understand the background or the events in which the writers had been writing their works. If we don't know the history, it becomes very difficult for us to understand what writer is writing. It is simply because of the fact that literature reflects the society. The thoughts of any writer is molded and shaped by the socio-economic and political background. A writer does not write something randomly. There is some reason or influence which makes him to write. For instance, you can take the example of Charles Dickens. His first novel, The Pickwick Papers, set at the backdrop of industrial civilization, while his another novel, Oliver Twist, shows the failure of New Poor Law of 1834. Similarly, if you are preparing your American literature or Indian literature, you must be able to know what was going at the background when the writers were writing their works. It is important to understand the history before the literature. Literature is nothing but the reflection of the society, and every writer was influenced from some kind of event or some kind of thought prevailing at that period of time. So all I want you to understand that it is good for you to prepare history before preparing your literature section. So having said that, in this particular video we are going to talk about the Dark Ages, which is marked from 500 to 1066 AD. We are going to trace the history of Roman Empire or Anglo-Saxon Age which led to these Dark Ages till 1066. So before beginning this video, if you are someone who believes in smart work rather than hard work, or who does not want to waste his hours and hours of time in writing down the notes, then you can simply place your order of our study material on English literature. You can check the link in the description below to know more about this study material. And now, without any further delay, let's begin this video. The year 1066 was the same year when William the Conqueror defeated King Harold in the Battle of Hastings. After 1066, the influence of French began to grow on English culture. Even at one point of time, after 1066, French became the official language of Great Britain. And before 1066 was the period of Anglo-Saxon Age, or we can say the Old English period. So before moving towards British literature, let's try to first understand why 500 to 1066 is known as the Dark Ages. What were the circumstances and situations that happened during the age 500 to 1066? So before we move forward, it should be remembered that in some books you will find the Dark Ages begin from the year 450 AD, and in some books you will find the beginning of these Dark Ages begin from 500 AD. So you don't have to get confused whether it was 450 AD or 500 AD. We can go with the simple rough idea, which is 500 AD to 1066 AD. Alright, so let's try to understand what was happening before 500 AD. It will give us a chronological sequence to understand British literature in a good way. So before 500 AD, the dominant culture was of the Roman civilization. In fact, before Anglo-Saxon invaded Great Britain, it was already occupied by Romans. The Roman people were living happily with the Celtic tribe of Great Britain. Romans were building infrastructure, taking care of their farms, and peacefully living with the people of Britain. But now what happened was, Roman people were living in the Great Britain and their own country was defenseless. The outsiders were attacking the Roman Empire over again and again, and that's why Roman people had to leave the Great Britain. Now this leaving of Roman people from Great Britain caused trouble to the people of Britain. Now the England was defenseless and open for the invaders to come. So after the Roman people went off the Great Britain, it was open to attack. The Germanic tribes, Anglo and Saxon, found the opportunity to invade the Great Britain and settled there. And when Roman people went off to their own country, they found that their country was getting destroyed by the outsiders. By and by, the Roman civilization started falling off. Now there is an important work that you should remember from NET perspective. In fact, there was a question in examination from this particular work. So remember that it was Edward Gibbon who traced the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire in his work with the same title. This work was published continuously from 1776 to 1789 in 6 volumes. So the question in UGC-NET examination was, when did this work by Edward Gibbon was published? So the work was continuously published from 1776 to 1789. And another important fact to remember is that 1776 is the year of American independence, whereas 1789 was the year of French Revolution. So this work, Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, marks with the beginning of American independence and it ended with the French Revolution. Remember the years 1776 to 1789. Now let's get back to our discussion of Roman Empire. So it must be clear that before Anglo-Saxons, it were the Romans who were living in Great Britain. After 500 AD, this Roman civilization fell down. With the falling of Roman civilization, the whole Europe was plunged into cultural and scientific stagnation. Rome was not only one of the powerful civilizations, but it also encouraged artistic and scientific development. The important point here to remember is that it was Petrarch who called this particular age the Dark Ages. The years 500 to 1066 were the Dark Ages, and it was said by the Italian poet Petrarch. Petrarch writes, "Midst the errors there shone forth men of genius, no less keen were their eyes." According to Petrarch, the period also had no values of Christianity. There was lack of Christian education, and this lack of Christian education can also be considered one of the reasons why these years are called the Dark Ages. Presence of Christianity is light, and on the other hand, the absence of Christianity is linked to darkness. Now, as we have seen that there were no intellectual developments or scientific developments during the ages from 500 to 1066. Let's talk about British literature. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, that after Roman people left the Great Britain in 500 AD, the Kingdom of Britain was open to get attacked by the outsiders. So Anglo-Saxons took the opportunity and invaded the Great Britain. They kicked out the inhabitants, the Celtic tribe, from the Great Britain and settled themselves. For the next 600 years was the age of Anglo-Saxon Age, and after 1066 the Anglo-Normans Age started. Now let's talk a little about the Anglo-Saxon Age. So it should not be confused that Anglo-Saxon people were not attacked by the outsiders. After 300 years, in 800 AD, these Anglo-Saxon people were get attacked by the Vikings. The first attack by the Vikings was around 800 AD, and the last attack was in 1066. These Viking people were 7 foot tall people, and they had their own religion. You might have heard the name of the Thor, Loki, and Odin, who were the gods of the Vikings. In fact, Marvel Studios have created a number of movies on this character Thor. You can watch Avengers by Marvel Studios to understand the power of these characters. Generally, Thor is known as the god of thunder, and Odin was the father of Thor. These characters, Thor, Odin, or Loki, were the gods of Vikings. They were not Christians, and for Christians they were pagans. Now, like Anglo-Saxon and Jutes were the Germanic tribes, these Vikings came from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. So from 800 to 1066, these Vikings kept on attacking the Great Britain, and whenever they attacked Britain, they often put the monasteries, books and works on fire. And when they put the books, monasteries and works on the fire, we cannot expect the historical records or written records from the years 800 to 1066. But all thanks go to the King Alfred the Great, who was one of the famous kings of Great Britain. He is the same king who defeated Vikings number of times. He is also one of the people who promoted the use of Old English, or you can say the native language. He translated many works from Latin language to the native language, and that's why King Alfred was known as King Alfred the Great. So during this period from 500 to 1066, we don't have much literature, just because the Vikings put everything on fire. And then there was another reason, that was the fall of Roman civilization. So that's why the years 500 AD to 1066 AD were also known as the years of Dark Ages. But from that perspective, we should remember that there were a number of writers who were writing at that particular time, and we still have the written records of them. So during this period, the important work or writers that are worth mentioning are Venerable Bede's, who is also known as the father of English learning. His important work is Ecclesiastical History of the English People. Another poets are Caedmon and Cynewulf, who were much interested in biblical works. And the last one, which we have already discussed, which is King Alfred the Great, who is also said to have started the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. So I hope you understood that why 500 AD to 1066 AD were the years of the Dark Ages, and why we only have a few works in this particular ages. So I hope you found the video worth your time. If you have any query, drop your questions in the comments below. So that's it for this video. Thank you.